An old, dilapidated-looking building stood silent, inside which a man was tied to a chair. The room was eerily quiet, with only his faint groans echoing. Then, an unknown man began splashing gasoline around him. Next, he lit a gasoline-soaked torch and threw it into a corner of the building. Slowly, the fire began to spread, but the man had overlooked one thing. A gas cylinder lay right there. The moment the flames reached it, a massive explosion erupted, and that unknown man himself got caught in the blast. Sometime later, when firefighters entered after extinguishing the flames, they found the same unknown man, now severely burned. He was immediately rushed to a nearby hospital. Doctors Yoon and Lee Yu-jung did their best to save him. Eventually, they succeeded, but due to smoke inhalation, his voice would never be the same again. When asked by the doctor, the man revealed his name, Park Ji-young. Hearing this, Lee Yu-jung fell deep in thought. Perhaps this man had some connection to her. On the other hand, we see a loan shark who was after a man named Park. Actually, Park had borrowed money from the loan shark and lost it all in the stock market. But for months, he hadn't repaid a single penny. The loan shark took him to his hideout. There, a doctor was extracting organs from a person's body. Seeing this, Park panicked. He began to beg desperately, feeling his end was near. Finally, the loan shark listened and gave him a 1-month extension. The next day, while Park was rummaging through his house, he found an insurance document belonging to his father. It stated that if his father died in an accident, the claim amount would be 500 million won. As soon as he read this, Park's eyes gleamed. With that much money, he could pay off his debt. But now the question was, how to get rid of his own father? The next day at work, Park saw a Chinese worker being fired. The man pleaded desperately. But when the supervisor refused to listen, he angrily pulled out a knife and shouted, "You're firing me just because I'm Chinese!" Seeing the mix of desperation and rage in his eyes, Park realized this was the man who could do his dirty work. Taking advantage of the worker's desperation, Park struck a dangerous deal with him, a deal to eliminate his own father. The plan was to run his father over with a car, making it look like an accident. The Chinese worker agreed to do it, but demanded 30% of the insurance claim. Finally, the deal was sealed between them. Park's father was returning late from church that night. Suddenly, the Chinese man rammed into him with a pickup truck at full speed. Meanwhile, his son stayed awake until midnight, eagerly waiting for the good news. But there was no word from the Chinese man. Even by the next afternoon, his phone remained switched off. Meanwhile, Park received a call from the police station. The truth was, Park's father had died, and the police had summoned him to the hospital for identification. Before going, Park put on an elaborate crying act in the bathroom, then headed to the hospital. When the body was confirmed to be his father's, he shed a few calculated but convincing tears in front of the police officer. And so, a heartless son had successfully disposed of his own father. But it wasn't that simple. What came next made the ground slip from beneath Park's feet. There had, in fact, been an eyewitness to the incident. Park's father and Miss Kim used to attend the same church every day. The previous evening, as they were returning from church, Kim had witnessed the accident. The driver of the car had deliberately tried to kill Park's father. Before Kim could call the police, the man became aware of her presence, so he fled the scene in reverse. But that wasn't all. His father's body was found by a blogger on a nearby hillside. Someone had taken him there and buried him in the ground. This was clearly no ordinary hit-and-run case, meaning Park's carefully laid plan had already begun to unravel. Meanwhile, in another part of town, a couple in love was driving somewhere. Ji-yoon suddenly felt overcome with passion and began making romantic advances towards Seong-hun. In the midst of this, their car hit someone. Seong-hun, being a doctor, rushed to check on the victim. But by the time he reached the person, he also feared that his affair with Ji-yoon would be exposed. So instead of reporting to the police, he decided to dispose of the body. Though Ji-yoon was completely against the idea, amid their heated whispers, they noticed a scrap collector by the roadside who had witnessed everything. Before the man could escape with his bicycle, Sung-hun lunged at him without hesitation. In the struggle, the scrap dealer suffered a head injury and lost consciousness. Sung-hun dragged him into the car as well and drove toward the hills with both bodies. As soon as they reached the hills, the scrap dealer regained consciousness and began screaming. He was terrified, certain this man would kill him too. At that moment, an idea flashed through Song Hun's mind. Without hesitation, he transferred 10 million won into the junk collector's account. This was hush money, payment for burying the body and keeping quiet. The junk collector couldn't refuse. Together, they buried Park's father's body on the hillside. Everything seemed resolved, until the junk collector demanded an additional 20 million won to keep the secret. Song Hun was stunned. Nevertheless, by morning, he paid the amount to settle the matter. He then removed the dashcam's memory card and tossed it into a dumpster along with his clothes. He tried his best to leave no evidence behind. Yet, despite all his precautions, someone was already on his trail. Meanwhile, Song Hun's wife had hired a private detective to catch him red-handed in his affair. And now, that very detective was hot on his trail. The next day, the junk collector showed up at Song Hun's clinic, demanding another 30 million won. On the other side of town, Park had only 16 days left, trapped in the insurance claim limbo. Until the investigation concluded, he wouldn't see a single won. To make matters worse, the man was breathing down his neck for the 150 million won payment. The Chinese man threatened Park. "If you don't give me my 150 million won, this tape goes straight to the police." The recording contained undeniable proof of their murder-for-hire deal. Park snapped, "You were supposed to leave the body on the road. If it doesn't look like an accident, how will the insurance company pay the claim?" The Chinese man didn't care about these details. He just wanted his payment. Before leaving, he revealed a chilling truth. Park's father had still been alive after the hit and run. He'd seen the Chinese man's face clearly. Had the killer left him on the road, he might have survived and identified him. So instead, he'd taken the old man to the hillside and buried him alive. Unbeknownst to them, a detective watched silently from a distance. He'd been tailing the Chinese man and seized his chance to swipe the recording device from his pocket. But he couldn't outsmart the Chinese killer, who'd been aware of his presence all along. In one swift move, the Chinese man permanently silenced the detective too. Now the killer's luck had run out. His every move had been captured on camera, a final twist of fate sealing his doom. He immediately informed Park about the murder and made it clear he wanted his money by tomorrow morning because he was leaving for China the next day. But Park didn't have a single penny to his name. Left with no other choice, he came up with a plan to eliminate the Chinese man. By the next morning, Dr. Song Hun's car had been repaired. The mechanic was puzzled. If they had hit a deer, why was there no damage to the bumper? They drove back home, unaware that someone was following them. Near their house stood an old abandoned building where no one ever came or went. They began digging Song Hun's grave behind that building. When Song Hun regained consciousness some time later, Ji-yoon's betrayal was more than he could bear. Without hesitation, he rammed the car into her, ending her story forever. Though he would pay the ultimate price for this act, in the very next moment, Kyuknam ended him too. Kyuknam's own cup of sins had overflowed. His reckoning was near. The story now shifts to an earlier time, when Ji-yoon was still in college. The school was preparing promotional pamphlets for an upcoming festival. It was decided that the cover would feature the school's top student, Lee Yu-jang's photo. Lee Yu-jang had no objections, but Ji-yoon couldn't bear it, for she had been a strong contender for that coveted cover spot herself. Driven by vengeance, Ji-yoon deceitfully invited Lee Yu-jang to a restaurant, where 3 of her despicable companions did something unspeakable to Lee Yu-jang, an act that would leave a lifelong scar on her soul. Now, 10 years later, Lee Yu-jang had become a skilled doctor, but that traumatic incident still haunted her like a relentless nightmare. Meanwhile, flames engulfed the abandoned village building. Firefighters discovered one completely charred corpse inside, and near the stairs, another man barely clinging to life. Doctors Yoon and Lee Yu-jang fought desperately to save him. Against all odds, they succeeded in reviving him. When asked his name, the man weakly replied, "Park Ji-young." A shadow of recognition crossed Dr. Lee Yu-jang's face as she froze in thought. Perhaps there was indeed some connection between this man and Dr. Lee. Yet even when her boyfriend Yoon asked, she revealed nothing. The anguish was eating her alive from within, and her rage burned visibly in her eyes. To find resolution, she sought help from a detective agency. She needed to track down those 4 people who had violated her 10 years ago. The story rewinds 10 years. And we see Dr. Lee with Park Ji-young. They were on a date that day, all thanks to Ji-yoon. The night had grown quite late. Just then, 2 masked assailants attacked them. After the incident, the police called in 3 suspects for identification, one of whom was Park Ji-young. Lee was shocked to see him there, knowing he was innocent. But then the officer revealed he was actually the mastermind behind the whole plan. By now, Detective Han had tracked down all 4 perpetrators. 3 of them had already faced the consequences of their actions. And the 4th? He lay in room 402 of Lee's hospital, laughing uncontrollably despite his severe injuries. Something was clearly off. Local police arrived to investigate. "Officer, what were you doing in that abandoned building?" Park claimed he had been forcibly taken there. "When I opened my eyes, 2 men were fighting in front of me. Then, one of them splashed gasoline everywhere and set the place on fire." What happened next? Park couldn't remember. The tragedy had left his fingers completely charred, making identification impossible for now. Park's reappearance reopened Lee's old wounds. She contemplated ending him, finally being free from this pain forever. But she couldn't go through with it. And so Park recovered and walked out of the hospital a free man. As he walked, Park kept muttering to himself. Where had he gone wrong? After all, he had buried Ji-yoon and Dr. Song-hun carefully and escaped cleanly. Meanwhile, Song-hun's wife was relentlessly pressuring Mr. Han to expose her husband's affair. Han had gathered substantial evidence, but was still searching for that one definitive proof. He assured her his investigation would soon be complete. Just then, 2 of Han's detectives came running to him in a panic. The situation had taken a shocking turn. The truth was, while gathering evidence, they had been tailing Dr. Song and witnessed the entire incident with their own eyes. They even had photographic proof. 10 hours before the building burned, at exactly 8 p.m. that night, Park had sent an address to the Chinese man for the money exchange. The Chinese man suspected Park would try something shady, so he enlisted his friend Kyuk-nam's help. The 2 had actually met in prison. Kyuk-nam was about to be released after a full 2 years, and before leaving, he distributed his prison belongings among his friends. Outside the prison, Kyuk-nam met Ji-yoon. They were both con artists who worked together to scam people. Ji-yoon would lure men on dates, while Kyuk-nam would pose as her brother and stage an interruption at the right moment, then extort hefty sums from them by threatening to call the police. In some cases, they blackmailed elderly people for money too. Their next target became Dr. Sang-hun. Ji-yoon was busy seducing him, while Kyuk-nam went off to handle another job. The matter involved a full 150 million won. The Chinese man had identified this Park fellow, the one who had ordered his own father's murder. Coincidentally, Kyuk-nam already knew him. They had attended the same college, though Park was 3 years his junior. The night had grown deep when Park's father was returning home from church. Completely unaware someone lay in wait to take his life. Suddenly, an idea flashed through Kyuk-nam's mind. He took full responsibility and got Zing out of the car, then explained the entire plan to Ji-yoon. So this was the whole scheme to trap Dr. Song-hun. Now it was time to collect the money from Park. But Kyuk-nam couldn't understand why Zing was suddenly in such a hurry to return to China. Zing remained silent, while unbeknownst to them, the police had already tracked down his hideout. There, they found a garment ID belonging to Park's father. Meanwhile, Park arrived at the scene, intending to eliminate Zing, when suddenly, halfway through their exchange, Park had his own strange demands, insisting, "I'll pay you further down the road." At the perfect moment, the assassin rammed his car into the old man. When the first hit didn't finish the job, he threw the car in reverse and struck again. Zing, the man, jumped out of the vehicle, only to hear panicked gasping nearby. He immediately rushed toward the sound, but whoever had been there had already fled. Meanwhile, Park's father still clung to life. If he left them here, he could be in serious trouble. Moreover, to claim the insurance money, they needed to make this look like an accident. Meanwhile, Ji-yoon was busy tormenting Sang-hun, scheming to swindle him out of his money. This delay proved fatal. They walked straight into a police checkpoint. The authorities were searching for a suspect connected to 2 recent murders. The moment Zing saw the police sketch, He recognized the man standing right behind him. But sensing the precariousness of the situation, Zing abandoned his car right in the middle of the road and fled the scene. The police had already sprung into action. Meanwhile, Park reached that same abandoned building in his village. Zing assumed the money must be hidden elsewhere. Why else would Park be heading there? But in reality, the cash had been in the car trunk all along. When discovered, the entire bag was filled with nothing but paper. Park seized the moment to attack Zing, but his plan backfired spectacularly. Zing had already seen him practicing his hammer swings and remained vigilant. With the tables turned, Zing summoned Kyuknam to the scene. By now, Kyuknam had seen the news reports, his face plastered across every news channel. Escape had become impossible. Then, seeing Park, a light bulb went off in his head. Their build, hats, even their facial features were identical. Without hesitation, he eliminated Zing on the spot. Because if Zing fell into police hands, it would jeopardize Kyuknam's entire operation. He forced Park into his own clothes as Park begged and pleaded for his life. But Kyuknam remained merciless. His story ended right there, so that Kyuknam could live his life. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until the gas cylinder exploded, engulfing him in the blast. Ironically, this accident worked to his advantage. The police easily accepted that he was Park Ji-young. Years later, when this same man resurfaced, Dr. Lee became increasingly restless. Pressed by Yoon, she finally confessed the truth, that until she eliminated him for good, she would never find peace. The next evening, as Kyuknam was returning home, Lee suddenly blocked his path. Kyuknam tried to reason with her. "I'm not Park," he insisted, urging her to stop this pointless pursuit. But Lee refused to listen. Mid-argument, Kyuknam began swaying unsteadily, then collapsed to the ground without warning. This was no accident. Lee had secretly switched his pain medication, a calculated move in her revenge plot. For Lee, this was the golden opportunity she'd been waiting for all these years. Just as she drew the knife to kill him, Yoon arrived at the scene. He pleaded with Lee to reconsider, warning this act would destroy their lives forever. After much persuasion, she finally yielded. Yet before leaving, she unleashed all her pent-up rage on Park's unconscious form. Meanwhile, the police grew suspicious of Park's testimony. He had claimed to be tied to the chair, yet the man found near the chair was already dead. The complete DNA report could take 2 weeks or even a full month to arrive. So without delay, the police launched their operation to apprehend Park. En route, they tried calling him to trace his location, but Park had already grown suspicious. While searching for his passport to flee, he stumbled upon an old pamphlet, its contents flooding him with painful memories. The truth was, Jiun had first approached Kyuknam to teach Lee a lesson. He had just been released from prison then, reluctant to get involved in such schemes. The school lacked boys willing to do Jiun's dirty work. So Kyuknam had ultimately devised the entire plan for her. So Kyuknam was truly the main culprit all along. Now he finally understood why Dr. Lee had been so obsessed with pursuing Park after the incident. Shortly after, police arrived at his house, only to find he'd already escaped to the bus terminal. Today marked exactly 30 days since the repayment deadline, yet he couldn't figure out who had sent him this mysterious notification. Suddenly, several men appeared and abducted him. Meanwhile, we see Dr. Yoon, who was immediately let in once identified. He occasionally took night shifts here to earn extra money, but today would be his final visit, having finally paid off all his debts. Now he possessed enough money to buy a house and marry Lee. Even his boss fully agreed with his plans now. With this resolved, Yoon began his medical procedure. The patient seemed strangely familiar. When he removed the mask, shock froze him. This was the very man who had ruined his girlfriend Lee's life. This is what they call karma. What goes around comes around eventually. Yoon typically sedated patients before procedures, but with Kyuknam, he showed no such mercy. And so, friends, this concludes the Korean web series, Karma. We hope you enjoyed this twisted tale of cosmic justice. Please like, subscribe, and share for sport.